Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPhone 16e and compare it against the iPhone XS Max and see which particular iPhone is the better one for you. Now, if you have all the money in the world, then clearly the iPhone 16e is probably the better phone for the most part. But I will also say that with the iPhone, XS Max, there's probably still some capability left within this device, but like I mentioned, it might make a little bit more sense to go and pick up a different device, throughout this video, and I'll explain that throughout this video. So if you want to pick up any other phones or anything like that, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of both these phones, the iPhone XS Max came out in 2019. The iPhone XS Max actually came out in 2018 and not 2019. Now, this phone was a pretty big upgrade coming from its predecessor, because this phone finally gave us a little bit of a bigger type of display. So before, we were basically getting just like the smaller 5.8-inch displays. Now, at this point, we started getting a little bit of a bigger size display, which was actually very cool. I loved having that type of capability, and that was what was going on inside of this device. So it was a big, massive display. You're getting the notch up top, and the fact that this was a 6.5-inch Super Retina HD display, that was something that was very, very cool. The panel itself wasn't perfect. There were definitely some issues and some bugs that may have happened within it. But I think for the most part, if you were to go through and kind of use this phone, you would probably feel like you were getting a pretty decent experience from it. And I do think from that side, that was kind of a really big thing going on for this type of device when it came down to it. So it was a big device, it was a big panel, and looking at it now, it still does hold up decently well. Maybe not perfectly well, but still it is like a decent type of experience when it kind of comes down to it. Now with something like the iPhone 16e, this one is a little bit smaller for the most part. So this one is a 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. So this panel is definitely smaller. So, that's just kind of one of those minor things to keep in mind. It's not really the biggest deal to keep in mind in the world, though. That might be a big deal to you, but it's still a really good size. And because it is supposed to be kind of one of these smaller types of phones, it's not going to be this massive one, but it's still going to be giving you a lot of flagship features. You're getting the notch up top, which is still perfectly fine. Getting a little bit of bezel around it, but it's much less bezel than the iPhone XS Max because it is just the flat sides give it the impression that it is a much slimmer phone. You were getting USB Type-C on the bottom of the iPhone 16e, whereas on the bottom of the iPhone XS Max, you're getting a Lightning port. So that right there, I think, is a pretty big takeaway. Being able to go through and pick up Lightning is very, having a Lightning port is still okay, but the 16e's USB Type-C port is significantly better in almost every single way. So in my personal opinion, I think that is a really nice thing going on for that particular device too. You're still getting a dual camera setup on the iPhone XS Max. With the iPhone 16e, you're getting a single camera setup. So that right there also is another pretty big thing to keep in mind there. You're getting a frosted glass back on the back of the 16e, where the XS Max is just getting a standard glass back. So that right there can also be a little bit of a differentiating factor here as well, because the 16e is going to give you an overall better feeling back than the iPhone, XS Max. So both phones still feel pretty premium, but when it comes down to that side, that's kind of how I see those, both these phones holding up from that particular side. Now, when it comes down to their price tags, the iPhone 16e right now is available to be bought brand new for $599. So that really isn't like a super cheap price to pay for a phone, but it's not like $1,000 phone plus. So it is a relatively more affordable phone, but the iPhone XS Max you can buy in the used market for substantially less. You can probably buy it for $220, probably even cheaper than that. So that is kind of a big advantage for the iPhone XS Max, the fact that it costs less than half the price of something like an iPhone 16e. So that right there could be a pretty big, advantage for something like an iPhone, XS Max for some people. So that right there could be another thing to keep in mind there too. When it comes down to the cameras, the iPhone 16e is giving you this 2-in-1 camera system. It's a 48 megapixel fusion camera, where the iPhone XS Max is giving you this 12 megapixel dual camera setup. So it's a 12 megapixel wide, then a 12 megapixel telephoto lens. Now, from what I can tell you here too, this is another big takeaway. If you're going to go through and pick up a phone, on average, a phone that, especially an iPhone that has more cameras, is probably going to be an overall better camera than a camera with one camera. But in this case, it's different because the iPhone 16e is such a newer phone. It's 7 years newer. You're going to be getting more features built inside of the iPhone 16e. Things like 4K 60 on the front and the back, which is going to be a pretty big advantage there. You're still going to be getting things like cinematic mode, visual intelligence, better portrait mode, Dolby Vision up to 4K 60. You're going to be getting very good capability inside of the iPhone 16e, where when I look at the iPhone XS Max, I still think that's a very good type of phone. I think that's a great type of camera, and there's not too many issues with it, but it's an older type of lens. It's going to be more grainy, and the 16E definitely, without a doubt, wins here for sure. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there too. Now on top of that, when it comes down to their software longevity, this is also going to be another interesting thing. The iPhone XS Max probably does have the highest likelihood of not lasting as long as something like an iPhone 16E. So if you're trying to get the phone that's going to be lasting for a longer period of time, it clearly is without a doubt going to be something like an iPhone 16E. That one is going to be the one that I would look at as probably being the better one in almost every single way. So if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, that is the one that I'd recommend people to probably buy for the most part, because that is going to be a longer lasting phone. But it's also going to be the longer lasting phone from a battery life perspective. So when you're taking a look at the battery lives, even from what Apple pasted on their website, the iPhone 16E lasts about 26 hours of video playback. The iPhone, XS Max lasts about 15 hours of video playback. So that right there is going to be a pretty big differentiating factor in and of itself as well. So if you're wanting the phone that's going to be lasting for a longer period of time here, once again, it's probably going to be something like an iPhone, 16E from a battery life perspective and from a software perspective as well. Now, on top of that, when it comes down to the performance, this is another very big takeaway as well. So if you're wanting to go through and pick up the phone that's going to be lasting for a longer period of time, from a performance perspective, the iPhone 16e is a very good performing phone. That phone is going to be giving you the Apple A18 chipset inside of it with basically, 8 gigs of RAM. Where the iPhone XS Max is going to be giving you the Apple A12 Bionic chip inside of it with 4 gigs of RAM. So the XS Max is still like a decent performing device for the most part. Like, it really isn't that bad. If you're going to go through and pick up a phone, that one's really not too terrible. I think it's a good phone for the most part. But dude, the iPhone 16e is substantially better in basically every single way you can imagine. That type of device is going to be giving you such an amazing type of experience. And if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, it does make a lot more sense, in my personal opinion, to go ahead and buy something like an iPhone 16e. That type of device, from almost every single way you can kind of imagine, is probably going to be the one that's going to be giving you the overall better experience in almost every single way, right? That's going to be a faster phone. It's going to be a phone giving you better battery life. It's going to be a phone that's going to be giving you just better longevity, software updates, everything across the board, including the camera, every single thing you can imagine is probably going to end up being better inside of something like an iPhone 16. I can't really think of any area where the iPhone XS Max basically wins that. Maybe besides the price tag. The price tag is the only area I can even kind of think about where the iPhone 16e, maybe isn't the best in, because it is severely overpriced in my personal opinion. It's not severely overpriced. It's just maybe $200 more expensive than what it should be. But beyond that, I still think this type of phone is still, good. I still think it is worth it in some ways, but the software updates are just kind of throwing me off. That's why I think of phones like the iPhone 15s or the iPhone 14 Pros. Those phones I think would be really good middle of the ground phones. They sit in between these two. They're not as expensive as the iPhone 16e or the 15 Pro is, but the other ones aren't. And the XS Max, it's still a cheaper phone, but it's older, and I wouldn't really recommend people to buy it. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.